What's going on, everyone? Alex here, sitting in a park in beautiful spring-like Krakow in Poland. I was dreading doing this video, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. I wasn't sure whether my thoughts were going to be laid out in a way that I could most effectively and eloquently deliver this idea and shed my views on this. And I know that this is a controversial, fragile area, but I felt that even if my delivery of this is not 100% perfect, and I'm still learning, I'm still figuring things out, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on this or a doctor or whatever else, but I wanted to put my 2 cents forward, especially having seen the impact that a tweet that I shared yesterday made. Obviously, it's a significant area of interest for a lot of people, especially going against the grain of the cultural kind of view on this. And the tweet I shared was something along the lines of: society's obsession with mental health, mental illness, is making mental illness worse. And I still stand by that idea, and I wanted to kind of go into a little bit more depth around what I meant with it and see if I can attempt to speak on this in a little bit more detail. Obviously, this is the kind of thing that I could talk about for potentially hours. There's a lot of subtlety to this. There are a lot of variables at play, of course, that dictates one's experience, emotional experience, psychological experience. And in theory, I could talk about this for a long time. So I'm going to try and get to the heart of what I meant, and also see if I can sort of test myself to be able to speak through this without having a complete meltdown in the process. Now, this is a controversial area, so I expect some of you to resist some of these ideas and to disagree, and that's totally fine. I want to open up debate. Happy to have conversations with you in the comments below. But let's return to the main point, which is that all of this attention, and you can argue whether this is an obsessive attention in the media and society, but I believe that it is. We have this kind of, particularly in certain countries like the UK and the US, we got mental health awareness months and mental health awareness and people talking about mental health and mental illness in their profiles and their bios, and I think it is doing more harm than good. Now, the reason for that is because, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the idea that I really stand by, which is that we are all, every single one of us, we all have inherent mental wellness. We are all, beneath the level of psychology and thinking and ego and personal thoughts, we are all inherently well, happy, unconditionally at peace. We are all well. And to say that any one of us has an illness, a mental illness, is a delusion, is a false truth. It can't be true, because when we're talking about thoughts and thinking and psychology, we are talking about ideas. We are talking about subjective opinions. All thinking is subjective. All thinking is an opinion. And so to say that we have a mental illness is to say that we have thoughts that are wrong, and that can't be true because all thoughts are wrong. So it's a sort of, I don't know if there's a sort of phrase to define it, but you're trying to give weight to something that can't possibly have weight, because we're talking about thoughts. And so when we talk about you having a problem at the level of thought, at the level of mental, at the level of mind, you are only adding unnecessary weight to a bunch of ideas that you're already potentially being plagued by, if that makes sense. So a lot of us, we experience suffering, and we attribute that suffering to our lives, to the people in our lives, to difficult people, to difficult circumstances. And we think that those things are affecting our emotional experience. We think that the anxiety that we feel is coming from the society around us. And that's not true, because it is all being filtered first through our minds, through how we think, through how we perceive things. And so that's crucial in understanding a lot of this, is seeing that how we think about the world around us is how we experience the world around us. And if we have someone, a organization or the media or some expert saying that you have a mental illness or a disorder, it is going to add further weight to your suffering at the level of ideas. You are going to think that this thing is serious. You're going to think that you have a problem. You're going to think and think and think, and it's the weight of the thinking that adds to your suffering. And I think this is why a lot of people are suffering, is because they think they have something wrong with them, when all that's happening is that they are buying into their thoughts, and they're buying into the reality and the heaviness and the seriousness and the disorders. The idea of having a disorder is a very heavy idea, and they've forgotten to tap into their true nature, which is purity of happiness and wellness, which is already there. So to say you have a mental illness is it's basically like having someone coming along and saying, bullying you into thinking that you have a problem, and then you kind of buying into it and you kind of ruminating on it and making it worse and worse and worse. So attention is the worst. Attention on a problem when we're dealing with a psychological issue is the worst thing you can do. The more you talk about something at the level of thought, at the level of ideas, the worse that heaviness around the idea becomes, and the more you buy into this false reality that there is a problem. Now, before we have people arguing that there are mental disorders and there are people with bipolar disorder and that kind of stuff, this is where we start getting into the physicality of things. This is when we start getting into chemicals and chemical imbalances and things like that, which are absolutely a thing. This is no longer in the realm of thoughts and the realm of psychology. This is in the realm now of physical imbalances and physical it could be something to do with diet, it could be something to do with genetics that are off, and where I see these showing up as what looks like a mental disorder is because when we are in a certain physical state, perhaps we have a low, not a low mood, we if we feel bad, or we feel or there is a chemical imbalance in our bodies, that can affect how we interpret our thoughts. Right. So, for example, a really good example is if you feel frustrated and angry, and then you go for a run. This is kind of looking at my own experience. If I go for a run, my mood lifts, and this is because my physical balance, my physical chemical structure has shifted as a result of the run, and that affects my thinking. But the thinking processes are the same. The functioning of my mind hasn't changed. My physicality has changed. My blood pumping through my body has shifted gears. And as such, it looks as though my thinking quality, my mental capacity has shifted, but it actually hasn't, because I'm continually, I'm either thinking bad, I'm either buying into my negative thoughts or I'm not. So at the level of mind, nothing's changed. And so this is why we see what looks like a mental illness, which is actually a physical illness, a physical disease that manifests as a mental illness. But to say that you have a mental disorder or a mind problem is buying into the illusion that the mind can have a problem when it can't. That's my opinion on it. So anything that looks to emphasize problems at the level of mind, at the level of psychology, is making things worse, because you are going to trigger unnecessary idea generation and idea supporting in the recipient, right? And you can't fix perceived problems at the level of thought. I think Albert Einstein said something along these lines. You might have to look up the quote. You can't fix problems at the level of thought, at the level at which they were created. In the same way that you can't fix a mental illness, a mental health problem at the level of ideas, at the level of mental health awareness. Mental health awareness, like when you are asked to not think of a pink elephant, what do you think of a pink elephant? In the same way that people talking about mental health actually raise the idea in one's mind that mental health is a thing and is a problem and is something that people lack, and that that your mental health is conditional on the things around you, you're just causing more problems for people. So that's kind of the idea in a nutshell. I hope I gave it some justice. I can obviously go into a lot more depth on this, and feel free to share down below or wherever you're reading this, if you want me to talk on this a little bit more. And there's obviously a whole new, like, I could speak on all the solutions that I could come up with, and that might be for another video. If I was to very briefly summarize what I believe is the solution to this problem, which is that mental health awareness is actually counterintuitive to mental health improvement, and I'm doing a lot of quotes here because this is all labels, and this is all kind of contributing to the challenge in the first place, is that we put labels on everything. The solution is, first of all, stop talking about it. If we talk about this stuff less, we're not going to be seeing it as such a big deal, like we didn't in the old days. 100 years ago, no one was talking about mental health problems and mental illness challenges, and so a lot of people were not buying into this idea of making things worse for themselves. And secondly, I think there needs to be more education around how the mind works, and that I think a lot of the challenges and the problems in society are coming from this idea that the world around us has the capacity and the power to influence our mental health, when it doesn't. It is all within us. And the only challenges we make for ourselves are by applying more thoughts and applying negative thoughts to our experience. And that is why we feel suffering. We are creating that suffering in our own minds. And so salvation lies in the form of letting go of all of this thinking and all of this rumination and all of this obsession on all these ideas. The more we think on it, the more we add weight to an idea that isn't real, the more we're fabricating suffering. And so the solution is to not see it as such a big deal, to focus instead, rather than to focus on what's wrong with you, seemingly what's wrong with you, to focus on creating things, to focus on building a successful life, to focus on exercise and creativity and meeting people and just being present and enjoying life and focusing on one's reality, getting our heads out of all of this talk around mental health and mental illness. So that's it from me today, guys. I hope that was helpful, and perhaps it spurs on a conversation around this stuff. There'll be a lot more that I'll be sharing on the mind and thinking and ego, and how we tend to limit ourselves, and how we block our own energy and that kind of stuff. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching this, and I appreciate any comments and suggestions and any support in the form of likes and subscribes. Thanks, guys. Take care.